You've done it. You faced the shadow. You dove into the work. You opened the wounds and walked straight through them. And now? Now you feel empty. No fire. No pull. No spark to keep going. And the weirdest part? You should feel amazing. You should feel like you're on top of the world. But instead it feels like something inside you quietly broke. You sit there wondering, what just happened to me? But what if this isn't a failure? What if this silence, the absence of drive, isn't a breakdown, but a message, a signal that something inside you has stopped performing? There's a hidden truth about shadow work, something nobody warns you about. Carl Jung understood it. He hinted at it, but he rarely said it out loud. Because when you go deep into yourself, when you really dig into the unconscious and bring all those repressed emotions, unmet needs, childhood wounds into the light, something strange happens. You don't just feel better, you feel different, in a way that can be deeply unsettling. Jung once wrote, "The collapse of the persona is often mistaken for depression." He got something that modern psychology often overlooks. When you truly integrate your shadow, when you stop being run by your fears, your people-pleasing patterns, your unconscious stories, your entire inner engine stops working, or at least the way it used to. And that's not dysfunction. That's not failure. That's transformation. And for years, maybe your whole life, you've been running on invisible fuel. You worked so hard because you needed love. You pushed so hard because you were terrified of being left behind. You strived to succeed because deep down, you believed you weren't enough. These weren't conscious motivations. They were survival strategies, automatic systems built to keep you safe. But shadow work doesn't just heal these things. It exposes them. It rips the mask off your ambition and shows you the fear underneath. It reveals that the hunger for success wasn't about passion. It was about pain avoidance. That even your dreams may have been built to outrun suffering. And when those internal drivers go offline, when fear stops being the fuel, you don't just lose motivation. You lose the only reasons you've ever had for doing anything. This is what Jung described as the dissolution before rebirth, the shedding of one identity before the emergence of another. But nobody tells you how quiet that space is, how weird and disorienting it feels to be suspended between who you used to be and whoever you're becoming. And let me tell you about Sarah. Not her real name, but her story is true. She spent 2 intense years in therapy. After a painful breakup cracked her open, she realized she had been carrying deep childhood wounds, abandonment, fear of rejection, the need to constantly earn love. She committed to the work, EMDR, inner child healing, shadow integration, all of it. And by the end, she was free. The anxiety that haunted her was gone. The need to be liked, to overextend, to perform. It all dissolved. She learned to enjoy being alone, to be enough for herself. But then she tried to return to her old career in marketing. And something was just off. Not wrong in a catastrophic way, just hollow. Campaigns that used to light her up now felt pointless. Client meetings drained her. The promotions she once chased now looked like elaborate distractions from a life she didn't want anymore. "I used to wake up with a fire in my belly," she said. "Even if it was fear, it was fuel. Now, I wake up and feel nothing, like I'm waiting for a voice to give me orders, but it's not speaking." This is what Jung referred to as the Negredo phase, borrowed from the alchemy of transformation. Negredo means the blackening, the death of the old before anything new can be born, a spiritual composting, a necessary breakdown of all the structures that no longer serve. But in our culture, we don't honor that space. We want healing to feel good. We want growth to be linear. We want to be productive again, ASAP. We think shadow work is like medicine. You take it, and then, boom, you're better. But really, it's more like surgery. Yes, the procedure was a success. But recovery? Recovery is weird. Recovery is slow. Recovery is quiet, confusing, and full of strange moments when nothing makes sense. During this phase, you might notice things start to lose their meaning. Career goals that once felt essential suddenly seem silly. Relationships you were invested in feel like roles you're performing. Even your hobbies might feel fake, like you're forcing joy instead of feeling it. This isn't clinical depression. You're not hopeless. You're not broken. You're just no longer driven by the same things that used to matter. Because the familiar fuel, fear, anxiety, shame, is gone. And now, without those motivators, you're standing in stillness. No fire, no map, no compass. And that stillness? That's not a problem to solve. It's a transformation to endure. Jung saw this not as collapse, but as the reordering of the psyche. The ego, the part of you that's built on separation, validation, proving, striving, has stepped down. But the self, with a capital S, the deeper, truer essence of who you are, that hasn't fully risen yet. So here you are, in the space between. This in-between is what mystics call liminal space. It's the hallway between one room and the next, and it's in this space that people feel the most lost. But pause for a second. Take a breath. What if this is exactly where you're supposed to be? Have you been carrying this quiet ache too? That whisper that says, I should feel more excited, I should be doing more, I should want something. But you don't. And that voice inside that used to bark orders is silent. Here's the truth. Your psyche is protecting you. It's not letting you go back to the old motivations because it knows they're not real. They were survival strategies, not soul truths. But it hasn't shown you the new way forward yet either. This silence isn't laziness. It's not failure. It's not even stagnation. It's the sacred pause before the next chapter. In ancient cultures, this pause was honored. There were rituals for it, ceremonies, initiations, vision quests, dark nights of the soul. All of them recognized, before rebirth, there must be death. Before clarity, there must be confusion. Before purpose, there must be silence. But we live in a culture that pathologizes stillness. We diagnose mystery as a disorder. We try to fix what might not be broken at all. Jung warned that if you skip this part, if you force yourself back into productivity before the shift is complete, you risk building a new life on the same rotten foundations. You'll change your outfit, but not your identity. You'll reinvent yourself, but stay trapped in the same patterns. Here's the truth most people don't see coming. The silence? It's not collapse. It's sacred. It's your soul catching its breath after a lifetime of sprinting. Every form of motivation you've ever known that came from fear, from needing approval, from avoiding pain, from chasing validation, it's gone. Not because something broke, but because you've outgrown it. Your old engine ran on fear-fueled gasoline. Now, your system has gone quiet, not because you're failing, but because it refuses to run on that fuel anymore. You are in the pause before the becoming. And Carl Jung knew this well. He said, you are not failing. You are in between. So think about it. Be honest with yourself. What did motivation used to mean to you? Was it really passion and purpose? Or was it fear in disguise? Were you chasing love? Trying to prove you're enough? Avoiding being seen as lazy or weak or unworthy? Shadow work doesn't just bandage those wounds, it exposes them. And once you see them for what they really are, you can't unsee them. And here's what happens next. You stop believing the lies. You stop believing that your worth comes from being productive. You stop believing that love has to be earned. You stop believing that you need to be someone impressive in order to be worthy of simply being. And when those beliefs crumble, so does the entire structure they built. That structure? It was your persona. The persona is the mask we wear to survive. It's the version of you that your family praised, the version your school rewarded, the version your job promoted, the character you became in order to fit in, succeed, be accepted, be safe. But it's not you. It's the role you played. Shadow work peels back that mask. It shows you what's underneath. And once you've seen the difference between your performed self and your true self, you can't go back. The problem is, most of your life was designed around the performed version of you. Your job, your relationships, your ambitions, your goals, maybe even your entire identity, were created to keep that persona alive. So when it starts to die, you don't just lose motivation, you lose direction. You're grieving a version of yourself that was never fully you to begin with. Let me introduce you to David, another true story. David was a successful architect, respected, accomplished, ambitious. He had it all figured out, or so it seemed. Then he started doing deep inner work, processing childhood trauma, healing attachment wounds, rewiring his nervous system, the whole journey, and by the end, he felt peaceful, more grounded than ever before. But when he tried to go back to work, to designing buildings, leading teams, chasing accolades, he felt disoriented, like someone had swapped out his insides and forgot to leave the instruction manual. He described it like this: I used to be so driven. 60-hour weeks? I thrived on them. I had 5-year plans, 10-year visions. I knew what I wanted and how to get there. Now I look at those same goals and feel absolutely nothing. It's like they belong to someone else. He thought he was depressed. He went to his doctor, considered going back into therapy, wondered if he'd somehow done the healing wrong. But what he was experiencing wasn't depression. It was a death, not of a person, but of a persona. David's old motivations had evaporated. The drive to impress his father, the need to earn success to escape shame, the fear of being seen as weak if he slowed down, all of those unconscious motivators, gone, integrated, resolved. But the new motivators, the ones that would come from his authentic self, they hadn't shown up yet. He was in that sacred pause, that awkward, quiet space between identities, that exact place Jung said we all pass through when the ego dissolves but the self has not yet taken the wheel. And here's the critical truth. Real motivation doesn't come from compulsion. It comes from truth. Let's talk about fear-based motivation for a second. It's intense, right? When you're running on fear, you can do anything. You'll wake up at 4:30 a.m., hit 5 goals before lunch, grind yourself into dust, and call it ambition. And yeah, fear works, for a while. But eventually, one of two things happens. 1, you burn out. 2nd, or you heal. And if you heal, that fear no longer drives you. So now what? If you don't need to prove anything anymore, what's left to pull you forward? That's the moment where people panic. That's the moment they feel empty. But that emptiness? That's not the problem. It's the opening. It's your psyche creating space for something new to emerge. If this part hits you, if this emptiness is something you've been carrying, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're healing. You're becoming someone who doesn't run on panic and perfectionism anymore. But here's where it gets tricky. Your authentic self, it doesn't shout. It doesn't guilt you. It doesn't shame you. It doesn't sound like an alarm. It whispers. It nudges. It invites. And if your life is too loud, filled with pressure, urgency, and all the noise of survival, you can't hear it. That's why this silence is sacred. That's why this void is necessary. You've been emptied out for a reason, so something real can take root. Now let's go back to David. Remember, he was in that limbo space, questioning everything, unsure of what came next. Until one day, he stopped trying to figure it out. He started going on long walks. No phone, no podcast, no checklist, just walking. Not as a productivity hack, not as a self-improvement ritual, just being. And during one of those walks, he noticed an old building he'd passed 1,000 times. But this time, something clicked. Something about the bones of that building, the structure, the history, the quiet beauty of its decay, it spoke to him. Not with words, but with a feeling, a resonance. He didn't rush home to turn it into a project. He didn't pitch a client. He didn't monetize the inspiration. He just sat with it. He kept visiting that building. He started sketching, not plans, not blueprints, just impressions, drawings of what it felt like, of what it might want to become, of the story it seemed to be telling him. No pressure, no deadlines, no metrics, just curiosity. And for the first time in a long time, David felt something. Not urgency, not hustle, not fear, but pull. A quiet, steady pull. That pull eventually led him to reach out to the building's owner. One conversation led to another, and eventually, David found himself leading a restoration project. Not just an architectural job, but something deeper, something personal, something alive. He wasn't imposing his vision on the space. He was collaborating with it. That project ended up changing the entire trajectory of his career, not because he forced it, but because he listened, because he honored the silence, because he trusted the whisper, because he didn't try to rush back to his old life. Here's the punchline. If he had tried to force his old motivation to return, if he had gone back to grinding and goal-chasing, he would have missed the invitation entirely. He would have driven past that building another 1,000 times, never seeing it. He would have designed impressive structures that felt empty inside. He would have stayed successful, but disconnected from himself. And that's the trap so many of us fall into. We rush to fill the void. But the void isn't the problem. It's the doorway. Here's what nobody tells you about finding real, lasting motivation on the other side of healing. It doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It doesn't crash into your life with drama and fireworks. It hums, it's quiet, subtle, gentle. It feels less like a push and more like a pull, less like a demand and more like an invitation. When you begin to move from the self with a capital S, you don't hustle. You respond. You don't chase things like a starving person desperate to prove your worth. You follow the thread of curiosity, like a traveler who trusts the road ahead. You don't create out of emptiness. You create from fullness, because something in you is so alive it needs to be expressed. Let's go back to David one last time. That quiet spark he felt while sketching that abandoned building? It grew, slowly, softly. It turned into conversations, then opportunities, then a completely new kind of project. One where he wasn't just designing buildings, he was restoring meaning. It wasn't about status anymore. It wasn't about hitting targets or looking impressive. It was about resonance, about honoring something sacred in the architecture and in himself. And here's the beautiful part. That new career direction, it ended up being more successful than anything he'd built before, but not because he was pushing, because he was aligned. That's what motivation looks like when it comes from yourself. It's not about urgency. It's not about panic. It's not about lack. It's about truth. It flows not from fear, but from authenticity. It's like the difference between artificial light and sunlight. Both can help you see, but only one nourishes you. So what does this look like in your life? Here's a journaling practice that might help you tell the difference between ego-driven motivation and self-guided inspiration. Grab a notebook. Write down 3 things you feel you should be motivated about right now. Maybe it's your career, your fitness, your finances, whatever comes up. Then ask yourself, where did this should come from? Whose voice is it really? Who would be disappointed if I stopped caring about this? What am I afraid would happen if I let it go? What am I trying to prove by pursuing this? Really sit with that. Now write down 3 things you feel drawn to, even if they don't make sense, even if they seem small or strange or impractical. Maybe it's painting, or taking long walks in the woods, or volunteering, or sitting in silence more. Then ask, what would it feel like to follow this without needing to justify it? What would it feel like to trust this pull, even if I don't understand it yet? The difference between those 2 lists. That might just be the difference between ego motivation and self-motivation, between the voice that demands and the voice that invites. And it's not just David. Remember Sarah from earlier? The woman who healed from her childhood wounds and then found her career in marketing suddenly felt empty? She went through that same process. That silence lasted longer than she expected. Almost 2 years. Her friends thought she was crazy. Her family didn't understand. Her bank account was tight. Her old identity was begging her to go back. But something deeper was awakening. Eventually, she realized that what truly lit her up wasn't campaigns or clients. It was kids. She didn't want to impress. She wanted to connect. Not because it looked good on paper, not because it made her feel important, but because it made her feel alive. She became an elementary school teacher, not overnight, not easily, but truthfully. And that truth gave her back her voice, her spark, her sense of meaning. So if you're in that silent space right now, if you've done the work and now feel like you've lost your fire, let me offer you this. You didn't lose your motivation. You outgrew the reasons that used to push you. This isn't failure. This isn't backsliding. This is graduation. This is your soul saying, we're done performing. We're ready to live. The silence that's been haunting you, that's where your true self has been waiting. The emptiness you keep trying to fill, that's the sacred space being carved out for something real, something rooted, something yours. Jung never said this path would be easy. Individuation, becoming your whole self, requires walking through darkness, the valley of not knowing, the wilderness of uncertainty, the deep stillness of nothing is happening. But on the other side, there's not the perfect life you've been chasing. There's something better, a life that doesn't need to be perfect, because it's true, a life that doesn't drain you, because it's you, a life that isn't a performance, but a reflection. Motivation that comes from your authentic self doesn't burn you out, because it doesn't cost your soul. It doesn't vanish when circumstances change, because it isn't circumstantial. It doesn't depend on being liked, applauded, or rewarded, because it's not about proving anything. It's the hum beneath the noise, the compass beneath the storm, the light that doesn't blind, but guides. So if you're here, if you're in the in-between, please know, you are not broken, you are not behind, you are not lost, you are exactly where you need to be. This silence isn't the end of your story. It's the comma between the life you've been living and the one you're meant to live. And that life? It's worth the wait. If this message resonated, if you saw yourself in Sarah or in David or in the stillness between identities, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to know they're not alone. And if you want to keep exploring these deeper truths about soul, psychology, purpose, and becoming, hit subscribe. Because this conversation, this becoming, it's just getting started.